The Passion of our Lord Jesus Christ, according to St. Mark. They went to a place called Gethsemane, and they said to his disciples,
"Stay here while I pray."
He took with him Peter and James and John, and began to be distressed and agitated. He said to them,
"I am grieved even to death. Remain here and stay awake."
And going a little further, he threw himself on the ground and prayed that if it were possible, the hour might pass from him. He said,
"Abba, Father, for all things are possible through you. Remove this cup from me, yet not what I want, but what you want."
He came and found them sleeping, and he said to Peter,
"Simon, are you sleeping? Could you not stay awake for 1 hour? Keep awake and pray that you do not come to the time of trial. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak."
Again, he went away and prayed, saying the same words. And once more he came back and found them sleeping, for their eyes were very heavy, and they did not know what to say to him. He came a third time and said to them,
"Simon, are you still sleeping and taking your rest? Enough! The time has come. The Son of Man is turned over to the hands of sinners. Let us be going. Behold, my betrayer is at hand."
Immediately, while he was still speaking, Judas, one of the 12, arrived, and with him were a crowd with clubs and swords, from the chief priests to the scribes and the elders. Now the betrayer had given them a sign, saying,
"The one I will kiss is the man. Arrest him, lead him away under guard."
So when he came, he went up to him at once and said,
"Rabbi,"
and kissed him. Then they laid hands on him and arrested him. But one of those who stood near drew his sword and struck a slave of the high priest, cutting off his ear. Then Jesus said to them,
"You come with me with swords and clubs to arrest me as if I were a bandit? Day after day, I was in the temple with you, but you did not arrest me. But let the scriptures be fulfilled."
All of them deserted him and fled. A certain young man that was following him, wearing nothing but a linen cloth. They caught hold of him, but he left the linen cloth behind and ran off naked. They took Jesus to the high priest, and all of the chiefs, priests, and elders and scribes were assembled. Peter had followed them at a distance, right into the courtyard of the high priest, and he was sitting with the guards, warming himself at the fire. Now the chief priests and the whole councils were looking for testimony against Jesus, to put him to death, but they found none, for many gave false testimony against him, and their testimonies did not agree. Some stood and gave false testimony against him, saying,
"We heard him say, 'I will destroy this temple that he's made with hands, and in 3 days I will build another, not made with hands.'"
But even on this point, their testimonies did not agree. Then the high priest stood up before them and asked Jesus,
"Have you no answer? What is it they testify against you?"
But he was silent and did not answer. Again, the high priest asked him,
"Are you the Messiah, the Son of the Blessed One?"
"I am, and you will see the Son of God seated at the right hand of the power with the coming of the clouds of heaven."
Then the high priest tore his clothes and said,
"Why do we still need witnesses? You have heard his blasphemy. What is your decision?"
All of them condemned him, as deserving death. Some began to spit on him, to blindfold him, to strike him, saying to him,
Prophesy.
The guards also took him over and beat him. While Peter was below in the courtyard, one of the servant girls of the high priest came by. When she saw Peter warming himself, she stared at him and said,
You also were with Jesus, the man from Nazareth.
But he denied it, saying,
I do not know or understand what you are talking about.
And then he went out into the forecourt. Then the cock crowed. The servant girl, on seeing him again, said to the bystanders,
This man was one of them.
But again he denied it. Then after a little while, the bystander again said to Peter,
Certainly you are one of them, for you are a Galilean.
But he began to curse, and he swore an oath.
No, I do not know what you are talking about.
At that moment, the cock crowed for the second time. Then Peter had remembered that Jesus had said to him, Before the cock crows twice, you will deny me 3 times. And he broke down and wept. As soon as it was morning, the chief priests held a consultation with the elders, the scribes, and the whole council. They bound Jesus, led him away, and handed him over to Pilate. And Pilate asked him,
Are you the king of the Jews?
You say so.
Then the chief priest accused him of many things. Pilate asked him again,
Have you no answer? See the many charges they bring against you.
But Jesus made no further reply, so that Pilate was amazed. Now the festival he used to release prisoners for them, anyone whom they asked. Now a man called Barabbas was in prison with rebels who have committed murder during an insurrection, so that the crowd came and began to ask Pilate to do for them according to his custom. Then he answered them,
Do you want for me to release the king of the Jews?
For he realized it was out of jealousy that the chief priests had handed him over. But the chief priests stirred up the crowd to have them release Barabbas for them instead. Pilate spoke to them again.
Then what do you wish me to do with the man you call the king of the Jews?
Crucify him.
Why? What evil has he done?
But they shouted all the more.
Crucify him.
So Pilate, wishing to satisfy the crowd, released Barabbas for them. After flogging Jesus, they handed him over to be crucified. Then the soldiers led him into the courtyard of the palace, that is, the governor's headquarters, and they called together the whole cohort, and they clothed him in a purple cloak. After twisting thorns into a crown, they put it on his head. Then they began saluting him.
Hail, King of the Jews!
They struck his head with reeds. They spat on him. They knelt down in homage to him. After mocking him, they stripped him of his purple cloak and put his own clothes on him. Then they led him to be crucified. The passerby who was coming into the country carried his cross. It was Simon of Cyrene, the father of Alexander and Rufus. Then they brought Jesus to a place called Golgotha, which means the place of the skull. They offered him wine mixed with myrrh, but he did not take it. Then they crucified him, dividing his clothes among them, casting lots to decide which piece they would take. It was at 9 o'clock in the morning when they crucified him. The inscription of the charges against him read, "The King of the Jews." And with them they crucified 2 bandits, one on the right, one on the left. Those who passed by derided him, shaking their head and saying,
Aha! You who would destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, save yourself and come down from the cross.
In the same way, the chief priests, along with the scribes, were also mocking him themselves and saying,
He saved others. He cannot save himself. Let the Messiah, the King of Israel, come down from the cross now, so that we may see and believe.
Those who were crucified with him also taunted him. When it was noon, darkness came across the whole land until 3 p.m. At 3 o'clock, Jesus cried out with a loud voice,
Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani,
which means, my God, why have you forsaken me? When some of the bystanders heard it, they said,
Listen, he is calling for Elijah.
And some ran, filled a sponge with sour wine, put it on a stick, and gave it to him to drink, saying, Wait, let's see whether Elijah will come and take him down. Then Jesus gave a loud cry and breathed his last. And the curtains of the temple were torn in two from top to bottom. Now, when the centurion, who was standing facing him, saw in this way he had breathed his last, he said,
Truly, this man is God's son.